Hello folks, and welcome back to the Outdoors Station, the longest running outdoors podcast in the world. This video is the full conversation I had with Nikki Love from a few days back, which I've split into two audio podcasts for people on the go. However, I thought I'd leave it here as one long video for people who want to see Nikki and some of the images she took on her incredible adventure Run Australia. At an hour and a half, it is fairly lengthy, but hopefully you'll find it worth it. Now, starting in Cottesloe Beach on May the 1st, 2023 in Perth, West Australia, Nikki started the challenge to run over 4,000 kilometres or 2,500 miles from the west coast to Bondi Beach in Sydney on the east coast. Nikki became known by the passing truckies as the Sheila on the road, and it took her 76 days, 3 hours and 43 minutes to run across Australia, supported by her ever-patient partner, Sharif. Now, Nikki wasn't doing this for likes and clicks. She wasn't doing it for influencer status. She was doing it just to see if she could. Now, during the first part of our conversation, she mentions various training runs, and you can find all those in the links on her website or on the Outdoors Station website. But as you'll hear, not everything went to plan in Australia. And this is where character, determination, stubbornness, and a little bit of madness always helps. So even though Nikki finished in July of that year, she hasn't rested on her laurels. Always one for a new challenge, she's now enrolled on a degree course at Loughborough University. So naturally, my first question was to find out which she preferred, the academic challenge or the challenge of running over 2,500 miles.
I know which one I like better, definitely. This sitting and thinking, it mucks up two things. Is the sitting forever is just, it's hard work. And the thinking added to it is just, my brain, my poor brain. That doesn't mean that I don't think when I'm running. I do think when I'm running, but it's just so much simpler. Life is so much simpler when all I have to think about is what hurts, why does it hurt, how do I fix it stop it from hurting. This whole going to university where I have to analyse and synthesise and then project a thought process with research is like not just what I think. It has to be something that I've found out.
Yes,
a little bit harder.
And you've got to justify everything you write, haven't you? It's all got to be cross-referenced and legit and not produced by AI, which is probably the big thing that people are talking about.
Yeah, so I'm going to put my little hand up here and say that I read so many research papers, and half the time I don't understand it. So I do actually copy some of it into AI and say, "Can you please dumb this down for me?" and therefore I get a body of text that I can read and then go, "Yes, I've understood that. Yes, that means that." Because this whole writing technically, academically, oh my gosh, do they put in words that are that long when they could have a word that long? So I am using it. I think it's coming in really rather handy. So I think there is definitely a time and place for it.
That's a brilliant way of using it, actually. I never thought about using it to make things more backwardly understandable. It makes much more sense. It's a good one. Good one. And how are you getting on with your educational colleagues? I presume you're 1 or 2 years older than a few of them.
Oh yes, I've talked to a couple of other mature students who I'm the only one in my year, but there's a couple in the second year, and they have a similar thing to me, is that nobody really sits next to me. So I think it's like, don't want to sit next to her. You'll catch old or something. Having said that, the people that I do sit with, and pretty much everybody is lovely. They'll smile. Good thing is they open up the door and hold it open, because I'm too feeble and old to hold it myself. So there's always benefits. You can always see a positive side to this. But actually, the people that I do chat with and I have made friends, so I'm really happy about that. That they're fine.
So you're in the line of mature students in the back row, or tittering amongst yourselves, are you?
Yeah, definitely not. I'm the very front row. I have taken it up the front, and I have to be close enough so I can see, close enough so I can hear.
No, it's. I think it's sports psychology, isn't it? You're studying there. So
Yeah.
has the news been released yet amongst your peers, as it were, in the lecture halls of your achievements and what you've done recently?
Yeah. There's been a few things that have come out, and yeah, it is it's a nice thing to go in with a bit of years experience rather than sort of like them coming in from uni with the whole world or the life to experience it. I've come in with the experience and going backwards, so kind of reverse engineering everything really. But yes, I've had that. A few comments is like amazing, crazy
Yeah,
as a term that gets thrown around quite a lot, even with the young folk.
Well, I think you did a talk recently. Is that right? Did many of them turn up for the talk?
Yes, I did a talk, and it was nice. It wasn't a big group, but it was just a nice small little gathering where I got to tell a little story. So.
Wow, let's get into that little story then. So let's just have a little bit of a synopsis about sort of the previous history to getting to Cottesloe Beach. There's obviously 10 or 15 years worth of prior experience, and I think you refer to them as training runs. So would you just like to list them off with the timescale? I think you did your first marathon. The notes I've got here, it's 2001, 2002, and then from there onwards the story unfolds. So just give the listeners and the viewers a bit of an idea.
Okay, so 2001, I attempted my first marathon and failed. Got to the 19-mile mark and stopped, and had no understanding, no concept of how I could keep going. So I stopped and went home and got upset about the fact that I'd given up. I justified it. I'd only just recently had given birth. I had probably mama brain going on, thinking, yeah, I'm just going to go and run a marathon without training. It doesn't work very well. Got to the 19-mile mark and went, yeah, I wasn't ready for this. I'll go home. But most importantly was that I got home and I said to myself that, no, that wasn't the story I want to finish, how I want this to finish. I want to be a marathon runner. I am going to work on it. I want to tell this story of how you can, not get it right the first time, go again. I'd done it many times, and just on that, the doing that many times, I failed my high school, my final year at high school. I then went to night school, and 40 years later, I'm now at university. So if you want to do something, you don't give up the first time it doesn't go to plan. You try and find an alternative version. So anyway, the next year, 6 months later, I did the training and I finished my first marathon, second attempt. I then did another marathon a couple of years later, and these were the London marathons, because I only had this concept of London marathons, so you only do London marathons. So 2 years later, I got a place, did the London marathon. So that was 2004. 2010, I got another place for London Marathon. And by this stage, I thought, okay, what do I want to do? I don't particularly want to go faster. I want to see what I'm capable of. Can I go further? And the idea of running multiple days, I'd read a couple of books and it had sort of sunk in there that maybe I could do this thing. I want to see if I can. And so I came up with the idea that I'd run 30 marathons in 30 days. And the consensus of the people that were around me was like, no, you can't do that. How about making it a little bit smaller? How about 7 marathons in 7 days? I went, okay, all right, I can do 7 marathons in 7 days. I'm going to give that a go. Did the 7 marathons in 7 days, the 7th one being the London Marathon in 2010. Day 8, couldn't move. I was just like, I was totally flat. Crawled out of bed, crawled to the kitchen, crawled back to bed. That was it. That was me. Sort of had a couple of thoughts in there, is that, wow, I did it, but oh my gosh, look at the state of me. And it did take me months to overcome that, to get back to sort of a level of fitness for little injuries to settle down. And again, the consensus around me was, oh, you're not very good at this stuff, are you? Well, no, I'm not, but I can get better. But it sort of sat there for a long time, many years actually. But slowly and surely, this idea that I wanted to do these big things, I wanted to see what I was capable of achieving. Fast forward to 2016, it was the year before my 50th birthday, and I wanted to do something crazy, something wild, something back like that again. And so I booked myself to go to the jungle, and I did the Jungle Ultra. The following year, I ran 63 marathons in 63 days, and I'm going to go really fast now. I ran 63 marathons in 63 days. I wanted to run across Australia. I knew I couldn't run across Australia just yet for many reasons. So I booked in these other little sort of training runs. So I ran around Ireland. I ran across the Netherlands. I ran the length of Wales. And I thought, okay, I'm ready to go to Australia. COVID happened. Couldn't go to Australia, so I tried to run Australia on a treadmill. Not my smartest idea, but it was yet another training run for the emptiness and the monotony of what I knew was going to come in Australia, the Nullarbor, did that. Finally got to Australia, May the 1st, and started this crazy run. That's me in a nutshell.
Well, that's an epic thing, and I'm sure people listening to this will go, "What?" And every new edition you do, "What?" So let's just expand on a few of those things, because I know that during that period of time, say prior to May the 1st, let's just go backwards a bit. You didn't have the best times medically. You had a few injuries. You had perimenopausal issues as well, and there were other things that you're sort of trying to cope with and get into balance. But on top of that, even with the time it takes to train, plus the time it takes to do the activities, how did you manage to juggle a family life and work and all that sort of thing? I mean, the things that sort of stop the rest of us doing such crazy things, you know?
Yeah. So it's a simple answer, it's a simple answer. I wanted to do all of these things, so I made time to do them. I'd set my life up to be able to do this stuff. So when I had a baby back in 2001, I had already planned out that I wanted to be the mum who took her kid to school, picked him up, had school holidays. What could I do? I started a business that allowed me to do these things. So I already built this sort of life of there's things that I want to do, so I have to work to make these things happen. So I have had my own business, and that has been up and down. Some of the downs were that, I have ups and made a lot of money, downs, lost a lot of money. And some of those downs impacted my ability to go to Australia. So there is this background of I had chosen to have this lifestyle, and then when I wanted to do these adventures, I had to again try and work out, how do I make these things happen? So that's it's a very long story, but it can be very complicated, or it can be very simple in that I had to make it happen, so I did. And they were the choices.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm self-employed as well, and have been for many years, and I understand the fine balance you do. I think a lot of people think because you're self-employed, that you're having a fantastic time all the time, but of course you don't get paid holidays and you don't get all the other benefits that employees get, and sometimes people don't quite grasp the sacrifices that you have to make if you become well known, shall we say, for doing one particular thing or whatever. A lot of people don't look behind that and understand actually the sort of changes in your life and sacrifices you've had to make to achieve that. As much as it's all been your choice, it's still something you consciously have to go through, and it can be if you achieve the goals and you enjoy what you're doing, obviously that's the reward in itself. But at the same time, it can also be quite punishing that you can't afford, I don't know, a new suit or a new car or a new whatever, because you're putting your money where your interests lie.
Yes, definitely. It's easy to explain to somebody who knows the experience. A little harder to explain when somebody does a 9-to-5 job, but then they have to have this alternative issues. Is how do you get time off to do this? You've got to make a choice.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, so I think people can obviously go to your website, which will be on the screen, and we'll put in the show notes anyway, to look at some of the backstories and particularly some of the interesting ones you've done. In fact, before we come to Australia again, that one you did in the jungle, that sounded really interesting. I've only seen one picture of you. I think it was on your website somewhere, where you were obviously climbing a bank or whatever, and you've got to carry. It was very much like an adventure race. You have to carry all your own equipment for the period of time. But what was that actually like to race in the jungle? Because that's a completely different environment from normal Australia and the normal UK, really.
It was probably one of the scariest things I've done, and I've done a lot of scary things, but the so I do when I put these adventures or these thoughts together, is just sort of start at the very top and go, all right, what can kill me? List all those things, and there was a whole lot of things that could kill me in the jungle. There's a whole lot of things that could kill me in Australia as well, but you start there and you work your way down and go, okay, how do I mitigate against this? And it really was scary. The animals that can kill, I don't know, they're on a par with Australia, but possibly more likely because I was in the jungle. Whereas in Australia I was on the road. The terrain was just incredible, but really dangerous yet again. And the experience was, it was 250 kilometres over 5 days. Yes, carrying everything that you need to survive for those 5 days on your back, including tent. It was a hammock tent, food, but they gave you water at checkpoints. But the scenario is that the checkpoints are very far apart, and in between the checkpoints is just jungle. And so once you actually get in there and you start moving around, you realise that actually, I think the amount of people that I did it with, I think there was only 20. So 20 people spread out pretty quickly over a day. And so I spent pretty much the whole 5 days by myself, knowing that it was a course, but you are just in the middle of nowhere. And for them to rescue you, they would have to hike in to be able to carry you out. So it was, and some of the drops were sheer. It was just a crazy experience. Like I said, probably the most scariest I think I've done, but also most affirming in that it's been put in a position where you've got to rely on yourself. Okay, it was a little bit of a safety net there, but you have to rely on yourself. Then you're going to have to sort of keep trudging and keep going and deal with things that might scare you, and do it scared anyway. And that became quite a lesson for Australia. And I talk about lessons with running, but it crosses over into life as well. I'm scared when I do a lot of things, but I'm okay with being scared because I know that I can function still scared, and I just have to keep going and keep going and keep going, because part of it is having a wild imagination, but the wild imagination gets me to these places anyway. But the imagination enough to go, okay, I can deal with this, I can handle this, I'll keep going, I'm all right.
Right.
Even when there's potentially danger.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, having been to the jungle myself, I've just a few days whilst doing some travelling and stepping off the path just a few yards. It's incredible how quickly you get disorientated. You've got no idea which way's north, let alone which way's up. What did you do for navigation? Just very briefly, did you have a GPS or a compass, and you had to get from A to B, or was it literally you just had to beat your way through the undergrowth?
So it was marked out, but if you didn't pay attention, then it was very easy to get lost. And I did get lost. You had a tracker on you, so hopefully they noticed. And if you'd gone too far off the path, then either you realised because you didn't see a marker for a very long time, you'd have to backtrack and try and hopefully get back onto the right track. I did it once majorly. The rest of the time it was pretty well marked out, that there was only sort of like one way to go. So it was either via a river, or then the jungle bit was kind of paved out. I say they'd gone through and cut bushes down, so and put markers along. So like I said, there was a safety net there, but you had to be very vigilant. And I did a same race organisers in the desert in Namibia, and took a wrong turn there and went quite a few kilometres, and they realised, and they were out searching for me because of the GPS that I had on me, to try and bring me back. I had realised that I'd gone the wrong way. Thankfully, it was an easy turnaround to come back, but I'd gone quite a few kilometres before I realised that I was in the middle of nowhere, in the desert by myself. Yeah, that was, again, another scary thing.
Yeah. I mean, how does it make you feel when you realise you've made a mistake of that sort of magnitude?
It is scary, and it's very easy for the mind to go, oh, you dumb bum, and berate yourself. And this is part of the self-talk that comes into play. That actually telling yourself off, okay, you tell yourself off for a little bit, and then you have to gather your thoughts and go, all right, I need to be smart enough to think this through and get myself out of this. So self-talk becomes such a part of the experience, because even, just running the 63 marathons here in the UK, if I made a mistake, and sometimes the mistakes were not carrying my water or leaving the house without my water. I mean, that's such a rookie mistake. But I was tired and went off to start my run, and then sort of realised I didn't put my water bottles in my backpack. Okay, turn around, go back, fix the situation. Don't talk yourself down. Don't talk yourself out. Talk yourself up. And these are the things that actually, this experience and practice and training runs all the time, is that you learn to be able to turn this self-talk around, right, so that you're actually going in the right direction, not talking yourself out of situations.
Right. Okay. And looking at the other one, the 63 marathon, 63 days, 7-day ones, Ireland, Wales, and the Netherlands, were you completely on your own and providing your own support, or did you have a partner or somebody that just sort of kept your eye on you and topped you up with food every now and again, or were you completely solo, as it were?
So that they have varied. So the 63 marathons, my partner Sharif, he did come along to get me going. The intention was that he'd only stay for the first week, and then I would be off on my own, driving the van by myself, just parking up at the next place. That didn't work. After the first week, he was like, "You're not going to do this. You can't drive." It took a couple of weeks before I was able to look after myself. And and so he did hang around, but obviously things, you have these beautiful plans and things don't go to plan, and so you've got to make adjustments, you've got to pivot, you've got to turn, and part of that was the van actually broke down, so we had to come back from Scotland back to Nottingham overnight, run the next day, and then run around Nottingham instead of these 63 locations that I had chosen all around the UK. But I kept the main goal there, had to pivot and turn to adjust to issues and problems and obstacles that came up, kept going. And when I was back here, slowly but surely, I got used to doing those long runs and was able to actually go out and run by myself. So there were days when I either had somebody come run with me, or I would run by myself. With everything I needed in my backpack. So that then varied. But then when we went on the trip again to go to the different places around the UK, then he was in the car, or he was in the van, and sort of up ahead. Ireland was the same. We had a car. He was 10 k's ahead, and I just leapfrogged me.
Right.
Netherlands, I was on my own with a backpack. Wales, I was with another runner, backpack. So it has varied. Australia was very much, again, my partner Sharif as my crew, and just a little on that. That was he had to take a 3-month hiatus, and he wasn't given time off from work, so he actually had to quit his job. And again, these are things that we discussed. What are the risks we're taking? What is the implications? What is the sort of long-term thing? And the long-term thing is actually, it's taken him a while to get back to work, and this has had a knock-on effect. But we had chosen this path. So he's now at work again, and we're trying to sort of get our lives back on track again, because it cost a lot of money, and that's the thing that you have to toss up.
Yeah. It's got to come from somewhere, certainly. And like we were discussing earlier on, I mean, I think people don't realise sometimes the amount of sacrifice it takes to just get to the start line in many people's lives. So, talking of which, getting to a start line of a country where everything is trying to kill you, the weather's trying to kill you, the insects are trying to kill you, the snakes, the dogs, everything's trying to kill you. Welcome to Australia. and
there are signs everywhere.
Yeah.
Come to the beach. All right, here's the places where you can't go in the water because you'll die.
yeah, absolutely. What were the jellyfish out there that was all cause of the problems? It's not the Portuguese man of war, is it? Or is it something else? There was particular stingers. Oh God, it was. It's a beautiful place and fantastic, but you really have to do things carefully. Talking of which, here we are on Cottesloe Beach. I've been to Cottesloe Beach. I've swam there. I've surfed. I've posed. I've done various things in my younger, fitter days. And it's a beautiful place to be. And I just looked recently on the Google Earth before we had this conversation, just to remind me what it looked like. It looks completely different now. It's really built up and a magnificent surfer's paradise by the looks of it. But what a place to start your adventure.
Oh, it really is, but it's more low key than Surfers Paradise. So, but yeah, I'd never been to Cottesloe Beach. I'd been to Perth when I was a baby. So my parents were 10-pound poms, so they caught a boat to Australia to emigrate with me as a baby, and they arrived in Fremantle, and then took the boat, continued over to Melbourne. So I grew up on the east coast in Melbourne. Right. So getting to Cottesloe Beach, Perth, was just an incredible experience, because I had looked at this for 10 years. I'd pinpointed where I was going to start if I ever started. That was such an experience of finally making it to this place that had been in my head for such a long time. And it was just stunning. But to get to that start line, like I said, it was a 10-year process. But even from my hometown place called Geelong, that was a 4,000 kilometre 5-day trip to get there before I even started.
If there's one thing I want to get across to people while we have this conversation, is you just don't realise just how big Australia is, and the route that you took, as coincidence would have it, I've driven that route many years ago, but again, looking at the notes and reading some of your blog posts and whatever else, it brought it all back. But we'll come to various stages as we talk. So going back to that first day, there's the two of you. Is there anybody else there? Is there like the press or Guinness Book of Records or anybody, or are you just standing there with a flag going, right, I'm off?
So we got there arrived on the Friday, and I was going to start on the Sunday. I think there's Sunday. I'm not sure the date now. Anyway, I told as many people as I could. I'd put it out into the press, even my hometown press, and nobody really was interested before I did it. So I got completely blanked, like, oh yeah, anybody can say they're going to do it. But I went to the park run, Cottesloe Park run on the Saturday. I met a couple of people who said that they would come along to the start, and they turned up somebody actually put us up for the night, which was lovely. And yeah, we got to the start line just before 7 o'clock in the morning. And actually, this is somebody that I think you should also talk to. Tom Fremantle, he's walked around the world, and he was doing the Australia leg of his walk, and he'd flown in from Asia the night before, and he turned up at my start. Now, I'd been following Tom for years, and I was having a fangirl moment. I was just like, oh my gosh, oh it's Tommy's here. A couple of people waved me off, and we filmed everything to make sure that I could tell the story and that it was real and it wasn't just a figment of my imagination. And then took off from there.
Right, okay. And so the first day's run then, I think, when I worked out the mileage, which I'll put up on the screen at some stage and we'll talk about perhaps towards the end there, but I worked it out that you had to average across the period of time you took, which was 76 days, folks, almost 8 weeks. I was going to tell you 8 weeks, 10, 11 weeks, 53 kilometres a day. So 53 kilometres. Now, last time I went to Perth, which was, 10 or 15 years ago now, it had expanded so much. Did you actually get out of town on the first day? You actually made it?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did. Whilst Perth has grown, it's still quite a small major city. 55 kilometres took me to pretty much the outskirts. It was beyond the suburbs. It was starting to get into the little I don't know what you call them. They're not suburbs of Perth, but just country towns. So I got to the first country town. We had no idea where we were going to park up. I ran 55 kilometres that first day. We were driving around in this country town and looked at the football club and thought, well, we'll park here. But then we weren't sure, and so there was a pub open. So Sharif went into the pub and said, and the guy said, yeah, you can just park here, that's fine. And Sharif was like, great, I'm set for the night. What about you? And I'm like lying in the van going, no, all right. So I walked into the pub. And the guy said, oh, you've got a long way to go. Yeah, no, thanks. He goes, you're looking a bit rough. I went, oh, thanks. Are you going to make it? Yeah, I'm going to give it my best go. And that was pretty much how it continued on.
Typically
the first
Australian.
3 weeks.
Very, very understated.
Yeah. Very understated. The first week it was rough. Second week got rougher. Third week things were starting to fall into place, and it wasn't until probably the fourth week that really I became functioning human again, where I was able to actually hold a conversation, stay awake, and by that stage we were in the middle of nowhere, so I didn't have anyone to talk to anyway, other than the jury.
Fair enough. So just that first period then, getting, say, warmed up into it. Let's just give people an idea. Now, you had was it a hip injury or something, which was affecting you before you started?
Yeah, so 2 years ago, I had a pelvis fracture, a stress fracture in my pelvis, and that was perimenopausal related. It took me 2 years to sort of rebuild, try and work out what I could do to. I can't fix being perimenopausal, but could I do things that were better for me, that would sort of help me? And I was looking at it in that direction. The GP advice was like, you probably shouldn't be doing this. Well, I disagree, and I had to do a lot of work to try and fix what I could fix, and also then understand that again I'm going to take a risk here, but I'm going to do it with training, with knowledge, with lots of fingers crossed, that I put myself in a position, my body in a position where I hopefully should be able to cope with this. Just before I flew out to Australia, I did slip over on some black ice and hurt my bum again. But I got to Australia, got to physio, and we'd sort of like tossed this up as like, I don't think it's anything serious. It certainly doesn't feel the same as when there was a bone problem. Let's just keep working towards sort of like building up, and so the pre-training for Australia didn't go to plan, but then again, nothing does. I haven't sort of experienced things going perfectly to plan. And again, this is this experience, this is this training of like, okay, deal with the issues, overcome the obstacles, work out a way to keep the goal in mind, but work your way towards it. And take the little detours that you might need to take. So the first 3 weeks were really part of my training to get me ready to do the second 8 weeks, second half of this run across Australia. So it was hard and it was tough, and there is an adaptation phase, and I would have preferred to have done a little bit more adaptation before I started, but it just rolled into it, and I just had to deal with the punches of, this is hard.
Okay. So were you then, just going back to those first 3 weeks? I visualise it in over the period of the whole thing. This is your acclimatising yourself really to what you were doing. Just talk us through what your daily routine was, and I mean, were you in pain or was it discomfort? Would you described it? You're pushing yourself through.
It's discomfort, and there is a difference between discomfort and pain, and there was some pain as well. So the pain was that I was running on a camber and I was running into the traffic on the right-hand side of the road, so running into the traffic so I could watch the traffic. I didn't want to run on the left-hand side. I'd tried it, and the traffic coming up and whizzing by me was more scary than me watching the traffic coming towards me. So I had to deal with the fact that I was on a camber and my right side was struggling because of this unevenness of the road. That was muscle, that was tendon, that was pain, but it was stuff that I could deal with, and I understood. At no point did it feel like it was deeper, that I couldn't quite find the pain point, which is what had happened with the pelvis. I was running that day, and I just could not pinpoint where this pain was coming from. So my background is sports therapist, and so I did have a very good understanding of body and muscles and all that sort of stuff. So that has helped me sort of deal with what goes on with my body when I'm running. So there was pain. There was just tiredness. There was an unexpected spike in temperature. I'd done all my research, and the temperature does, Mother Nature does what Mother Nature does, and so it was hotter than average. And hotter than average meant that there was lots of flies and all these things. They just make running uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, it's as I say, it's a lovely country when you hit the right spot, but on a bad day, like any country, it can really go for it, can't it? So your actual daily routine then, because I think you describe yourself, you're not a fast runner, you're sort of a plodder, if that's not being offensive, but a steady pace. So what sort of time of day did you start? Did you stop for sort of have some sort of break or a bite? And normally, what times would you finish? And obviously, just to remind people as well, as they'll see from the pictures, that the road, although it's wide, does have this camber on the side, and it's actually nothing but well, it's just a thick shale, isn't it? It's just hardcore I say pretty well all the way, really.
Yeah. I'm a fair weather runner. I like to run during daylight, and I like to see where I'm going. But that's obviously you have to do a little bit more with this, because I'm also a slow runner. So Australia that time of year is winter. Although they didn't tell Mother Nature that. So the daylight hours are 7 till 6. And they shortened the further in I got. So at one point before the time changed, it was sort of closer to 5 that it was getting dark. And I take a long time to run. So the goal had been that I would start just before, in the dark, just going into a sunrise. So 6 o'clock. Didn't always happen. Sometimes it was 7 o'clock. Certainly in the early weeks it was. Because I was so tired. So 7 o'clock sort of start, run, and in those first few weeks, it was really hot. It was over 30 degrees. And even though I had gone to Australia to acclimatise, it was still very hot. So certainly in the first 2 weeks, I had an afternoon little siesta or break, got in the van just to sort of get out of that sort of 1 till 2 p.m. sunshine, and got back out onto the road. I stopped to eat, drink, and finished as the sun was setting. As I got stronger, as I got more confident, as I became more human, which is the adaptation phase, the getting up at 6 o'clock became easier. And so running into a sunrise and then running slightly into when it got dark, I did that quite a few times, especially over the second half of the Nullarbor and heading into South Australia. But once we got back into population and the roads were busier, running at night, I thought it was dangerous for me. I thought it was dangerous for traffic, seeing this head torch sort of coming towards them. So I very rarely ran into the evenings, but I would start earlier in the morning.
Sure.
And yeah, basically it was just get up, run.
Right. And again, people see from the pictures, the Nullarbor is basically bush either side of the road. And I know that it took us 3 days to drive across it, and we camped out just driving off one of the side tracks and just drove for a mile or so in the middle of nowhere. I guess you guys did exactly the same thing to keep off the main drag.
Yeah. I mean, it was really spectacular.
It's beautiful. The sounds at night and the stars and the colours, magnificent.
Watching the stars was insane. So having no light pollution around, and just looking up, and you just have this. It's an entire blanket of twinkling stars. When I think about those things, running into the sunrise, So going east, I ran into all the sunrises. That experience of watching the earth and feeling the earth moving, because you could, the sun is creeping up over the horizon, and that's because the earth is moving. And I was like, oh my God, I can feel it. The stars fading as the day got brighter, and then expanding as the day got darker. It was such a nature connection. I don't think I've ever felt that before, and it was really, I don't know, it just made me feel tiniest little person in this big thing, but also this big person in this wonderful world. And I got to experience that, and how many people do get to experience that, I don't know, oneness with our planet. It's just, I know I sound very hippie, but it really was such an emotional experience that I got to do every day.
Yeah. I mean, I can. I'm fortunately I can relate to that. I remember the time that Rose and I spent out camping in the middle of nowhere, and the person we were driving across with, her hobby was playing the didgeridoo. So she'd be playing the didgeridoo as the sun set, and sure enough, there were the kangaroos bouncing across in the distance, and the stars, and spiritual is the only way that we both remember it. It's the word that we'd use both at night and in the morning. So it must have been a truly magnificent feeling, and hopefully it overcame some of that discomfort you had at the start of the day before you got into the heat. But when the heat hits you, it's like somebody puts you inside an oven. It's phenomenal. So it's incredible. You just put yourself through that every single day. And what about, I mean, with practical things like water and that sort of stuff? I mean, I know there are road stations every now and again, and they're certainly more regular now than they used to be, and we'll get onto the long section in a minute. But were you able to pick water up every sort of 100 miles or so?
Up until the start of the air highway, so the Nullarbor section. So that was at Norseman. We were able to pick up water all the time. And from that point on, for the next 1,200 kilometres, so what's it, 800 miles, is it, thereabouts? It was in drought conditions, and the roadhouses didn't have water, or they were on rationing. I think I got a couple of showers, but it was a 2-minute shower, but there was no water that you could fill up the van water thing. So we knew this was coming. We knew what we were facing. So we did have a lot of stock jerry cans on the van. And it wasn't, it got to a point where Sharif's doing the calculations, and he's like, all right, you've got these many days before we know that we're going to get to Seduna. I think it was Seduna. And you've got this much water, and you're using this much water. And, if things get really bad, either you'll stop and we'll drive and go get water and come back, because we had the van, we could do that. But it wasn't part of the plan. So we just sort of eked it out. What happened, so whilst I was going ahead, my friend Tom, who was walking across the same route that I was doing, pushing a pushchair, we'd sent him messages saying, mate, you're going to have to ask people, you're going to have to ask the truckies to give you water. Everybody who passes you, if they offer you water, take it, because you can't carry that amount of water to go through this space, because there is no water. So I was lucky in that we had the van. Tom had to rely on the kindness of people. I was asked, I looked a bit out of place. A woman running along the side of the road in the middle of nowhere, it does grab a little bit of attention. So people did stop and ask me, am I okay? Do I need anything? Am I mental? I didn't actually have to accept, I didn't need the help, but I did take water and when people were offering. So it was we had to take this all into consideration, and thankfully there's roadhouses every 200 kilometres, and whilst they didn't have the water, they had food and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was like 3 or 4 days between getting to somewhere relatively safe.
Yeah. And were you using the same routine that you'd practiced in your other adventures, or with Sharif anyway? That he would drive 10k ahead of you and wait for you to catch up. And if that was the case, how did you interact then with the vehicles that were coming towards you? I know that it's we've had our own experiences, but I should imagine your experiences were slightly different, being a single woman running along the side of the road.
Yeah, it was some interesting things. So originally I had a running vest on and had my water in there and snacks, and I said to Sharif, just leave me be. First day he left me be, but that didn't last very long. The water got hot. I got uncomfortable with all the amount of sweating. I didn't want to wear my vest anymore. I was being a total diva. Like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to carry things. I don't want to hold water bottles or anything like that. Can you just, rather than 10 kilometres away, can you be 5 kilometres away? And so we did actually adapt and change. And so the plan had been, 10, sometimes 20 kilometres ahead of me, which is how we practiced Ireland. That didn't happen. 5 kilometres in front of me. What we talked about at the end is that, when there's the two of us, and I get a little bit deeperish and demanding maybe, so he says, and if we did have arguments, he would be a little bit further than 5 kilometres away. And they're like, I'll go 8 kilometres away, that'll teach you. Meanwhile, I didn't know any difference. I was just but yeah, he stayed roughly about 5 kilometres ahead, and yes, I got quite a lot of people, and it was lovely, but also a bit weird that at least 3 times a day, 4 times a day, people would stop and say, "Are you okay? Do you need a lift?" And I'm like, "No, I'm all right. I'm running." "Okay, all right. Are you sure? Yes, I'm fine. I do this little thing called, when I running and I'm sort of feeling down and I put some music on to sort of keep me going. I run like this and I dance and jig and everything like that." And somebody did pull up to Sharif and say, because we had a sign saying that there was a runner on the road. So this person did pull up to Sharif and say, "Is she with you?" He goes, "Yes." "I think she might be having a fit." He goes, No, that'll be her run dancing. She's all right. She's fine. But mostly everybody was lovely. Occasionally, I don't know, over 76 days, you're going to meet some people who weren't particularly nice, but you have to blow it off. So a couple of people did drive at me rather than past me, and I didn't quite understand the
Right. And what about the road trains? I gather the road trains are obviously going up and down that route several times a week and a month. They must have seen you and gone, "Oh, she's still here."
Oh man, they are so big. There's a sign that says they're 56 metres long. That's the full length that they're allowed to get to. So 56 metres long is longer than an Olympic-sized swimming pool. And these things are curling at you all day, every day. They don't stop. And yes, I met quite a few who passed me going both ways. So they would truck over and then they would truck back and then they would truck again. And I could always tell. So a few of them stopped to say hi. And if they weren't saying hi, then they were like frantically waving. So I figured that they'd seen me more than once because they knew I was there. And people who were working on the roads saw them quite regularly too. So I became known as the Sheila on the road. So trucks have CBs, and we had CBs as well to try and keep in contact, because quite a lot of the time we weren't in radio phone contact. So just for safety, we had the CBs. And so we tune into the truckie channel, and then we'd have our own channel. And yeah, it was there's Sheila on the road. Is she mental? There's a Sheila on the road.
Well, I'm sure it kept Sharif entertained anyway, the conversation that he must have overheard. That's brilliant. And now, of course, as I say, coming back to reminding people how big Australia is, you actually go across a time zone. I think that's just before you go into the Nullarbor, isn't it?
4 time zones.
4 time zones as you ran through?
Yeah. Yep. So there's 2 time zones that are really close to each other, and I'm sure it's 4, or maybe it's 3. I'll have that. I'm going to have to look that up. But yeah, there's a couple of time zones that are really close, and it's at the South Australia West Australia border, and then there's another one sort of like only another 50 kilometres away, and it's just like it was ridiculous. How can you be like just over there and you're half an hour ahead? But yeah, the South Australia, West Australia. Then there's another one. I'm sure that there's 2 more after that. Could be wrong. Might be only 1 more. Got to be delirious. I don't know, but yes, minimum of 3. There was a minimum of 3 time zones that I passed through.
All right. Okay. So, I mean, as we continue along the road now, you've gone through the Nullarbor, or on the process of going through the Nullarbor. You've had your incidents, and you're getting well known by the drivers. Obviously, there's also a bit of wildlife as well, watching you. I think probably from a bit too close for comfort. That must have made you feel a bit nervous.
Yeah. I had been seeing these paw prints the whole way, and when I occasionally went off the so if I took the opportunity to run off the road, there was tracks that you could run along that ran parallel with the road, that followed the water pipe. So there's a big water pipe that goes from Perth to Kalgoorlie, and then splits and goes from Kalgoorlie to Esperance and up north. That is so when I was running along that, I could see these paw prints, and they're big paw prints, and I knew that there's wild dogs, the dingoes, and it wasn't until I got to the Nullarbor that I could actually see them and hear them. You mentioned that you could hear the howling. That's it's an incredible thing to hear, but it's also a scary thing to hear. And I used the mantra when it was getting up and running in the morning. It's like, what I can't see can't hurt me. But when the light comes up and you can see the things that can hurt you, then you sort of like go, oh, okay, this doesn't work anymore. What do I do? But saw quite a few dingoes, heard quite a few dingoes, and then I was running along, and we'd seen the dingoes in the morning, and was aware that they were around. This had been, so one of the things is if we were close enough at the end of the day to go to a campsite, then we would drive from where I finished to the campsite and then go back in the morning to start. And so on one of these trips back to my start, we'd noticed the dingoes, and Sharif had sort of mental note, okay, there are dingoes up ahead. So I got running, and all of a sudden I'm watching this dingo caught something out the side of my eye, and I'm like watching this dingo come running alongside me. It wasn't up very close, but it was 50 metres away, and I kept watching, and it kept running, and I kept running. And it kept running, and I kept running, and I'm thinking, I don't know what this dingo's doing here. But I also knew that there was one on the other side as well, and I'm just like, oh, is it hurting me? Is it what's it doing? Anyway, it just kept running until I outran it. But it was scary. It was incredible to watch, and I just sort of thought, well, that's an experience, isn't it? I don't know that many people who get to run alongside a dingo. I'm glad it sort of stayed.
to give people an idea, they are strong dogs, aren't they? They're muscular. They're muscular dogs. They're not the sort of thing you want to go and pet at all.
No, and actually, on that, shortly after I finished, there was a news article that a woman had been out running and had got attacked by a dingo, and really? She was running along the beach, and she ran into the beach to get away from the dingo attack, and it was only somebody was with somebody saw this and sort of went up and tried to fend off these dingoes that sort of saved her, but she ended up in hospital. So whilst I thought it was cool, they are not your
friendly petting
dogs. Yeah. Having said that, I've been chased by dogs before, and they just they attack as well. So yeah.
Well, Anyway, we could carry on talking for hours. But this is such a great story. So let's get towards the end. You're now sort of getting. Well, we've got Adelaide. Do you go Adelaide straight to Sydney, or do you go through Melbourne as well? I've forgotten.
I didn't quite get to Adelaide, so I took a left before I went to all the way to Port Augusta and heading towards Adelaide, but took a left to go through Flinders Ranges and sort of a beeline to Sydney.
Okay, so Adelaide's obviously quite a densely populated place. I seem to remember it's quite artistic at Adelaide, if I've got my memory serves me correctly. Were you sort of people starting to recognise you? Had your story gone ahead of you at this stage? Any of the media people picking this up at all?
No. Having said that, though, we did sort of send out messages to the ABC radio, and I did an interview. So a friend of mine is also on the radio in Geelong. So we organised to do an interview with her, and then it got picked up by the ABC, and they did another interview on the road while I was running. And it was all very quiet until pretty much the very end. But I kind of went cross country and just kept going and putting it out into my little world, hoping that somebody would pick it up somewhere. But it wasn't really until the end. I ran past a couple of people who sort of stopped me and said, "Are you getting help with this? Have you got PR? Have you got media?" I'm like, "No, I'll do it for you." Okay, so she this was in the sort of like the last 2 weeks, and she sort of sent out information. It's hard when you're doing it together. We thought that we'd be able to sort of do a little bit more PR stuff along the way. That just didn't happen because you're either out of radio range or and contacts and all that sort of stuff. So we just kind of kept to ourselves and just plodded along.
Wow.
It got picked up at the end, and on that last day, I did do a TV interview that night. So it got out there, but pretty much.
So tell us about the finish. Because I know there's a little bit of a story attached to that. So you hadn't actually, I believe you only had a couple of people who join you for a few kilometres running during the whole period of time, even though you've done your PR and a bit of promotion. I mean, normally when people do this, they get people, a handful of the local running teams or whatever come along. But you were fairly solitary right up to virtually the last few miles.
Yeah. I after that interview on the ABC, I was coming into a town, so this was part of the thing is that it pretty much you're always in the middle of nowhere unless you are in these big cities. But I did come into a town, and somebody did see me running, and he came and said, "Can I run with you?" And that's fine. He'd heard me on the radio. So he ran about 10 Ks with me, and that was the only person who actually ran with me the whole time up until that very, very last day.
Wow.
I'm good with that. I've practiced that, running by myself, being on my own, only having what's going on in here. and there's a lot of voices going on in there, so never lonely. And I talk to cows, I talk to sheep, I talk to goats. And so I was surprised to see the amount of goats that I saw in Australia. I didn't expect to see goats. Love goats. And llamas. Didn't expect to see llamas either. But I learned a little fun fact that llamas are like, they protect the sheep flock, so they're really aggressive. But they look after the sheep flock, so there's always usually a llama in amongst the sheep, and they will come and run at you and tell you to go away.
So coming down to Bondi Beach, then you had did you have the local running group join you, and presumably you had a big finish line all set up. Sharif had gone ahead with flowers and champagne and the end, a big the end sign. Go on, tell us all about it.
Right. So I had told people, if you want to come along, somebody who had run it the year before got massive traction. And he'd put a little call out on social media, and so people were aware. So people who followed him sort of became aware of me in these final few days. And as I was running towards Bondi, I knew that my mum and dad and my sister and my nephew were there, and that was pretty much all that I had that I knew were going to definitely be there. They'd flown in, and a few people said that they would, if they were there, that they would be down there. So I wasn't expecting too many people, and sure enough, I didn't get too many people. But as I was running on this final day, I ran pretty much through the suburbs of Sydney, and a couple of people sort of came out and gave me a wave. So that was it was lovely to see and feel, because I hadn't expected people to sort of go, "Hi, Nikki," and also it's a little bit like, oh, we're back in civilization again after being on your own for such a long time. As I was coming towards Bondi, I was just taking it easy. I was enjoying it. I had my son on the phone, talking to him, because he was in the UK. I wanted him to be a part of this, and a few people had sort of joined me for the last 5 kilometres. Somebody had joined me just before that, sort of at the 8 kilometre mark, and he was like, "Can I just pick your brains about running across Australia?" And yeah, sure. And it turned out that he was going to do it 2 weeks after me, so he was actually picking my brains about the whole course. So that was nice. But as I came running towards Bondi, it was sort of up on a hill, and the guys that were with me said, "There you go, there's the sea." I was just like, oh, oh my gosh, oh, I've done it. Well, not quite. I've still got a bit to go. So they were sort of like, "Come on, let's go, let's run." And I'm like, no, I want to take my time, and like, you got your time and everything like that. I said, no, it's fine. I'm just going to enjoy this. So ran down to the edge of Bondi, and then the finish line had always been the North Bondi Surf Lifesaving Club, which was at the other end of Bondi. So I ran in Bondi's an alcove, and I ran on this side, and I had to keep running to get to my finish line. And meanwhile, Sharif was sort of all around the place trying to sort of coordinate taking film and footage, and he hired an electric bike, and he didn't know how to use the electric bike, and it was all just going to. And meanwhile, this group of people were trying to urge me to finish fast, go sprint finish, and I'm like, no, I want to cruise through here. And yeah, he hadn't organised a finish line. So one of the guys, Chris, found some police tape, the red and white police tape, so on a barricade. So he's unwound that, and he's like, "Oh, we'll make one." So they grabbed this piece of police tape, and I ran through that and ran towards, and my mum and dad were there, and a few other people who were there I didn't realise were coming along, and went and tapped the wall. And then it was just, okay, that's the official finish line. But I'd started with my feet in the water at Cottesloe Beach. I wanted to finish with my feet in the water over at in Bondi. So I continued on, turned out all the GPS and everything like that we'd been tracking, and then made my way down to the beach. Sharif behind me, running along, trying to put my feet in the water. Once I put my feet in the water, that was it. I was done. So it was incredible, emotional. Yeah. I still hadn't prepared for that finish, because I was just like, you've got to keep focused, you've got to keep running, you've got to make sure you don't fall over, you've got to make sure nothing hurts. And before I knew it, the finish line had actually come, and I was just like, oh. But yeah, it was the most surreal experience of something taking so long, so much focus, so much effort. I'm glad that I got to experience it with Sharif. I'm glad that I had my son on my phone. I'm glad that my mum and dad were there to watch me. And ultimately that was all I wanted, to make sure that they were there for that.
I mean, you in something like that, where you've had 76 days of focus, and you've gone through, as you say, you've gone through the pain, you've gone through the discomfort, you've gone through the focusing, trying not to get hit by cars, eaten by dogs, and suffer from dehydration, all the rest of it, and it suddenly comes to an end. And mentally, you must have, it's not so much that moment you finished. I just wonder the blues that suddenly hit you, the sort of the following few days, where you realise you're not doing the same thing anymore. You have to completely recalibrate your brain. Did it take you a while to sort of calm down and refocus?
Yeah, it really did. And there's the mental side of it, but then there's the I'm going to say hormonal. I'm pretty sure it's hormonal side of it. So this high level of cortisol, and then you don't have to concentrate that to that intensity, and actually that then brings on quite a lot of brain fog, because it's almost like the brain is shutting down. I don't have to concentrate on this. So the first couple of weeks, my focus on my ability to keep a sentence together was pretty bad. The decision making as well. So it wasn't so much the physical side of it. It really was the emotional side of it. That it was just all right. Everything's switching off now, and that took quite, like you say, that it's a reboot. It was quite hard, emotional. It's a different kind of hard. So it's hard running every day for that sort of distance, but then it's hard for it to have gone, and there's a bit of a loss there. And there's high emotions, but then low emotions, and I'd gone 76 days without any sort of major injury, and the day after we went down to the beach, and I was lying on the sand, and I said to Sharif, can you pull me up? And he pulled me up, and I pulled something in my shoulder, in my what do you call it, the shoulder thing there underneath, in there. So I was actually in pain from an arm injury, and that then made sleeping really hard because it hurt when I laid down, and so my recovery was actually a little bit impeded by this ridiculous injury that I got the day after, where I tore something in my
Good job. Good job. It was. Good job it was the day after. Well, let's just look at the quick figures for the highlights of people that perhaps haven't quite grasped the full length of these things. So we're talking 76 days, 1st of May to the 16th of July 2023, 76 days, 3 hours and 43 minutes, a total of 4,044 kilometres, or 2,527.5 miles, which is an average of 53 kilometres per day or 33 miles per day. 10 pairs of trainers, which I have to ask, were they all in the van with you?
Yeah, they were, but I didn't use all 10. So I had 5 pairs that were my right size, and for some reason I decided to order a second set of another 5 pair in half a size bigger. That half a size bigger made such a difference in the comfort of the shoe, and so the second lot of 5 trainers didn't get used. They stayed in the van, and they got space where there could have been, I don't know, water or food or something like that. They just did not get used. So I used 5 pairs for the entire trip. And, I was adamant that I was going to take, I needed a new pair of shoes. And then when I didn't have a new pair of shoes to get into, I just had to use the old pair of shoes and sort of like turn the shoe over and go, okay, which ones look better today? So you know what, you can run in shoes that are totally run out. So another lesson learnt.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't need half the stuff I need.
The longest section with between road stations is the air highway, which is 1,650 kilometres or 1,031 miles. Well, as I say, without going on about it, I've driven it. It is a long, long way, and 250 kilometres or 156 miles between road stations. And when you're thinking about to run out of petrol, that's even longer. So yeah, that's a long way. 2 or 3 time zones, we can't quite decide, but there's several time zones there, which there was also crossed. Totally phenomenal achievement. So thank you so much for that. I suppose one of the sort of little sideline questions that occasionally get asked with something like this is, with that period of time, you must have had a complete library of music going round and round in your head on your various days' runs. Were there any particular tracks or particular pieces of music that stick in your mind as something that will take you back there instantly?
I am very much a creature of habit. So when I did my 63 marathons in 63 days, I created a playlist. And all my favourite songs, quite a lot of Australian songs, quite a lot of old rock songs. I'm a bit old, and that playlist has gone through every adventure I've done. I added a couple more songs, but it's pretty much the same playlist, and it gets played on repeat. I don't listen to music in earphones. I put it in my pocket and have the music just blaring out so that I can hear the traffic. And I had a plan that if I got to 40 kilometres, I was allowed to put on my music. And so I had to reach that 40 kilometres every day before I was allowed to turn my music on. And on days when I was having a really rough day, and there was quite a few of those, I would say, okay, you're allowed to have one song, and when you get to the end of the song, you're not allowed to have another song until you've reached the end of that kilometre. So if I was taking a long time, that was my incentive to get myself moving. And one of my favourite songs, which was a new addition, from the treadmill adventure, was Katy Perry's Roar. So it's the perfect running beat. It's 180 beats per minute. So if you want to know what a perfect running beat is, it's 180 beats per minute. And the words in that are just like so lifting, and I feel like I can win at anything once I put that music on. So that would get me going. But yeah, a lot of Australian songs there. So there was a lot of time to reminisce. a lot of times question what I was doing there. But it gives you a lot of time to actually think of, this is what you've chosen to do.
Yeah,
Be proud of it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks very much for choosing to do it, and thanks very much for sharing it with us. One absolute final question. Of all the things I could have asked you about this particular adventure across Australia, what should I have asked you?
No, I think you got them all. How did Sharif cope with it?
Yeah, well, good question, actually. Yeah, how did he cope with it?
He's definitely got a different story to me. So you were in the car driving, and it took you I don't know, how long did it take you to drive?
3 days to Adelaide.
Right. So he drove the 4,000 kilometres to Perth from Geelong. Then he drove 8,000 kilometres in my 4,000 kilometre stint from Perth to Sydney. So that was him going backwards and forwards to me. And then from there, he drove another 1,000 kilometres to get from Sydney back to Geelong, to my hometown. So he spent all that time by himself in the van. He went a bit doolally. It's probably safe to say. But he did say that he probably experienced Australia so more than what most Australians did. Yes, he's definitely got a different story to tell than I have.
Well, maybe that'll be the next interview then.
Yeah.
Thanks ever so much, Nikki, and all the best for your next big adventure, which we'll find out at some later stage. And I'll put all the details and contact details, obviously, on the video, and also show notes for the video and the podcasts. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you for asking those questions, and thank you for sharing that, letting me share that story.
Well, that's it, folks. My thanks to Nikki for sharing her story. Do drop by her website, nikkilove.co.uk, to read more of her exploits. If you want to see or hear more self-powered outdoors-based podcasts, gear reviews and conversations, then please check out the Outdoors Station website. And finally, thanks also to valleyandpeak.co.uk for helping support the show. And if you use one of my links to visit them, it helps cover the hosting fees for the podcast. Please leave a comment below if you've enjoyed this. So, until next time, as always, take care out there, and bye for now.